Hey everybody, and welcome back to GR Research, where we're really going to do something different today. We're going to have a little talk today. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff. We're not going to talk about speakers or anything cool that we're working on. We're just going to have to stop and address some things today. We're going to talk about the goals of GR Research and all the things that we're striving to do for our customers and what we're about. And we're going to have to stop and talk about the guys that we'll say are what we call naysayers. They're like some dog out there yelping about a half a mile away. And you hear them out there, yip, 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 yip. And they're still pretty far off. They're insignificant, and you don't really think that much about them. But every now and then they all get to yelping together, and you eventually have to step out there and tell them to be quiet. You have to go out there and shut them up a little bit and figure out what the heck they're all yelping about. And that's kind of one of those situations. We're gonna address some of the stuff that's come up recently, and we're gonna talk about a recent hack job on one of our products that's been out there on the internet or YouTube or something. And we're going to set some things straight and correct a lot of disinformation that's been out there on that stuff. And we are going to then kind of wrap things up with how are we going to deal with some of this stuff moving forward. And, of course, I'm still throwing olive branches out there to these guys, trying to help them and trying to educate them, which makes them even more furious if I say I'm trying to educate them, because they think they know everything. So let's get into this and let's talk about a bunch of stuff that probably just has been overdue and it needs to be talked about. So the goals and objectives of GR Research from the beginning have been to take a really high level of performance and try to make that obtainable for the average person. In other words, we're trying to give you champagne on a beer budget. We're trying to drag you up the performance ladder with us and help you as much as possible with every aspect of your audio system. And there's days I spend hours with customers helping them with, you name it, things that don't even involve our products. People just call me and want help. And because that's who I am, I wind up spending hours on the phone with them. I'm talking to them about everything from room treatment and placement and their electronics and their cabling and everything you can think of. And I do it on the emails and stuff as well. It's something that I've always done. I just feel like that's what I'm here for, and that's where my heart is trying to help people. And we also do tons and tons of upgrades. And I get so criticized for doing the upgrades. To me, the upgrades are fun. People send us speakers that they're not completely happy with. If they loved them, they wouldn't be sending them to us. And that's why we don't get a bunch of Wilson Audio speakers or Magico or some of these really high dollar speakers. They don't get sent to us because those customers are really happy with what they have. We get sent the budget level stuff that they hoped would be a good speaker, but just fell short. They were built to a price point, and they're looking to us to help them out and design something for them that they can implement, that's a fun project, that's going to give them good results, that's not expensive. And I do that stuff for free. I do all that design work for free. You guys send stuff in, I measure it, I test it, I don't charge anything for it. I send you via email all the measurements and give you recommendations of what can be done. And it could be that we go through and redesign everything and fix problems and things like that. Or maybe they're designed really well and we just upgrade the parts quality. Either way, I'm not recouping that time that I spend. I spend all that time and I sell the kit for just the price of the parts. So I have to throw that thing up on our website and sell a couple dozen more of them in order to break even on all the time that I spent on them. But I don't mind it. To me, that's a lot of fun to try and figure out how to redesign something, how to fix it, how to make something better. That's what's driven me all these years, is trying to make things better, and trying to make things better at a great price. And that also leads to the customers asking about cables and speaker cables, power cables, interconnects, you name it. And eventually we decided, if we can figure out a way to offer really high-end cables, but do so at a discounted price, like at a budget level price, then that's what we're going to do. We do that with speaker cables, and we sell it in bulk. And then we sell a cable kit, so you can figure out which ends you want. We put together a package for you with spades or bananas or tube connector ends. We send it out for you, and you get to DIY it and put it together yourself. So that's a way that we can offer a high-end cable at not a high-end price point. It's still at a budget level price point. We do the same thing with the power cables. We've got a couple that we're doing, and they've gone over great. We've got a 30-day return policy. You can order them at no risk. Try them all you want. If you don't like it, send it back. We give you your money back. We don't get too many back. Usually the only time we get them back is people order B16s, they order B24s, and they try them on everything, and they send back B16s, and they order more B24s. It's just the way it happens. They want the best one, and they love it, and it outperformed their $3,000 power cable on whatever. We do the same with tube connectors. You know, we sell tons and tons of tube connectors, and it's a really low-cost way to reach the highest quality of connection. And they outperform any of the binding posts and all the binding posts out there, I feel. But the binding posts, the really good ones, are 4 to 5 times the price of tube connectors, especially when you factor in you also need, an end for it, and these come with the end. So they're a great value, but they're still $59 for a whole set, because it costs quite a bit to have these things made out of copper. So we get ridiculed all over the place for selling anything that's like a connector or a power cable or speaker cable. It doesn't matter what this stuff costs. If it costs more than a coat hanger or a zip cable, zip cord, then the naysayers come out there and just attack us like crazy. Same with the power cords. They think that all that stuff doesn't matter. It all sounds the same. Wire is wire. You hear the same stuff from them all the time, and typically they attack with a lot of anger. They're upset, I guess, for some reason or another, and they've got to prove us wrong. And they're often posting with a lot of profanity and are being disrespectful. And anytime anybody posts in our videos in a way that's disrespectful to other people, or they've used profanity, regardless of which side they're on, we just hit delete. And we're just not going to deal with it. And that's been our answer to some of these guys. If you can't be civil, then why would we have a conversation? So we get these guys attacking us all the time. And like I said, we've got a target on our backs because of all these things that we talk about. We talk about higher quality components, capacitors, inductors, resistors, and we look for high performance alternatives that are not stupid amounts of money. And how do we get in the hands of our customers the best product we can at the lowest possible price? That's what we're about. So these, let's call them naysayers, they're always attacking us, and sometimes we kind of poke back, and we've poked fun at those guys in the past. So we've stirred them up a little bit. We know when we talk about cables that they're going to come out in force. They're going to freak out. And we talk about tube connectors and stuff, and their eyeballs fly out of their heads, and they start coming out in force, and they're the ones that are posting. And so that those guys, they're always there. And like I said, we've ignored them. But every now and then you have to respond to something that's happened, and this is one of those situations. A lot of those guys all get together on in certain places together. They all, birds of a feather flock together, and there's a forum or two where they all gang up, and they hate it that I have a T-shirt that says that has a NASA logo and it says "not flat," meaning that the Earth is not flat. We've called them flat earthers to poke fun at them, and just because it's funny, we try to make it lighthearted and just laugh about it. Somebody sent me a little globe that's cubical, which I thought was funny. That's been in several of our videos and stuff. And so it's really kind of lighthearted when we're poking at them and we're stirring them up, and we know they're going to respond when we talk about cables. It's just what you have to deal with. Their leader over there has purchased a Klippel measuring system, which is very expensive, and doesn't really know how to use it very well, and doesn't know how to interpret the measurements. It's crazy to spend, to me, $100,000 on a measuring system when you really don't know how to use one. You could have just bought a Pocket Clio, which is the consumer version of the measuring system we use. It would have done everything they wanted to do, and they could have used the other $99,500 to go buy a couple of new cars. It's not a matter of how accurate a measuring system is. It's a matter of, do you understand how to use it? If I'm going to go buy a watch, I don't need a watch that's satellite linked to the atomic clock somewhere that's going to keep exact time to the second. We don't need that. I just need to know what time it is. And measuring systems are a lot like that too. All of them, the new measuring systems that are software based, MLS, Clio systems, they've been used for years. The accuracy is very high. We don't need accuracy to the nth degree. We just need accuracy. So they keep throwing that out there like we have the best measuring system. It doesn't matter. You need to know how to use it in order for that tool to be effective. And for what we see over and over, we see not knowing how to use it. An example, we did some videos on cables, and one of the things we talked about was your power cables are going to output some electromagnetic interference. And if you run your speaker cables right alongside your power cables or on top of each other, obviously the electromagnetic field from one is going to affect the other. It does have an audible effect. And after I said all that stuff, I had customers and people who watched the video went and moved all their cables around, made sure they didn't touch, made sure if they crossed at a right angle. They used things to get them up off the floor. And I got tons of feedback from those guys thanking me because it was free. It was free advice. I gave them a tip, a tweak. They went and tried it. It worked. It made a difference in how things sounded. They loved it. That was awesome. But then you get these naysayers that say, "Oh, there's no way this cable is going to affect that cable." They think the electricity is just running through the wire and that's it. So the guy with the expensive measuring system did a video where he set up a cable to where he had this end plugged into the wall and this end with the IEC connector on it not plugged into anything. I can't make this stuff up. And tried to measure electromagnetic interference or any kind of electromagnetic fields from the power cable that was not plugged into anything. I had people calling me and emailing me saying, "You got to check this out. You got to check this out." Because I don't follow those guys over there. I don't know when they're doing videos. And of course, they're referencing me in the video, which I don't care. But everybody said, "You got to check this out, man. He's trying to measure this electromagnetic field off of a cable that's not plugged into anything. There's no current running through the cable." You got to be kidding me. I go and look. Sure enough, it's like, wow, that's crazy. It reminds me of those of one of those memes you see on Facebook where you see a little Volkswagen Beetle and the hood's up on it and there's steam coming out of the radiator. And there's a guy standing there with it, and the caption there says, "If you get this, we can be friends." It's like, and there's a lot of people that just they don't get it. And then there's car guys and there's Volkswagen guys that they look at that and immediately get it. And they realize Volkswagens don't have radiators. Those old Beetles have air-cooled engines in them. There's no steam coming out of a radiator of a car that doesn't have a radiator. And it's kind of the same way with this. It's like you can't measure the electromagnetic interference on a cable that's not plugged into anything. Oh my goodness. That's kind of like, it reminds me of your buddy that doesn't really know anything about cars, and one of his blinkers and the indicator is blinking fast. And he says, I have a blinker that's blinking too fast on one side. I wonder what's wrong with it. And so you tell him, probably need to go down to the auto parts store and get some blinker fluid because you're probably low on blinker fluid. And if he does, then it's really funny. And if he spends 30 minutes walking through the store trying to find blinker fluid before he asks the people that work there for blinker fluid, then it's hilarious. And that's kind of what's happened on this situation. You watch what's happening and you can't believe it. And you think this is hilarious. But kind of sad at the same time. You don't know, is this guy that stupid? Or does he think that the people that are watching it are that stupid and he's trying to trick them by not plugging it in? And I don't know. It's funny, but in the same time they're calling me out and they're showing how there's nothing to be picked up off of the power cable that's plugged into the wall, but not plugged into anything else. And then his followers message me and say, "Ha, see this? He debunked you." And that's even funnier because, that they're like the guys who don't understand that VWs don't have radiators, So, and it's funny, but then it's not. And the same guys, they recently ordered one of my XLS Encore kits, which is one of the little bookshelf kits that we sell tons of. And they were going to build that thing out and show that it doesn't measure like I say it does. There's no way it measures that well, and they're gonna stick it to me. And so they bought a kit and they had sent to another guy to put one of them together. So he put one together, and they said, well, the instructions doesn't say that you have to put insulation in the box. So we're not going to put insulation in the box. If it needed insulation, he should have said it in the instructions. And he didn't say anything about rounding the corners, so we're not going to round the corners. Knowing, of course, it's going to have diffraction effects, but it didn't say in the instructions around the corner, so we're not going to do that either. Well, even their own guys on their forum over there knocked them for not putting any insulation in the box. That was stupid. And, of course, it may not say that in the kit that we send out, but we have videos showing how to build the whole thing from beginning to end, and it shows in one of the videos how to put insulation in the box and where you need it to be placed, and if you're using no-res, where it goes, and all that stuff's all covered. But that didn't come with the kit, so they were going to show me and not put it in there. So eventually they put some in there, and because they were getting dogged for it, and they took the measurements, and it still measured great. And there was nothing they could really do to make it measure poorly. And they listened to it, which they listened to one speaker hooked up to something on their desktop and said, well, yeah, it sounds pretty good. For the price, well, they had to recommend it. They gave it a recommendation, but they don't recommend all those upgrades that I offer. These tube connectors and sonic caps and no-res and all that stuff. That's all snake oil. So of course they didn't compare it. They didn't try it. They didn't make any comparisons. They don't know. But they call it snake oil. Can't recommend that, but they recommended the kit. And it's funny to me that they call what they're doing a review. In audio, if you're going to do a review on some products, especially speakers, the main thing you want to do is set the pair of speakers up and actually listen to the speakers and give feedback. And you want to have it on good equipment, set up properly, get it away from the walls. You want to be able to hear the capabilities of the product, which is really important to us as a designer, because I spend a ton of time trying to make incremental improvements. In other words, I'll spend time comparing capacitors, comparing bypass capacitors, comparing connectors, comparing the wire, comparing everything, the resistors, and listening for those intangible things. It's not the things that you measure, it's the things that you can't measure. It's when you listen to the speakers play back, and you've got an acoustic guitar here, and you have an acoustic guitar here. And then you change out some of those things, and now you have an acoustic guitar here, and that other acoustic guitar is here. You've created more distinct space between them, and the fuzziness between them is gone, and the layering is better. The three-dimensionality of it is better, and there's a whole bunch of factors that affect those spatial cues and are there in the top octaves that create that three-dimensional sound field. And if you listen to just one speaker, you're never going to get that. So even though those guys gave it a recommendation, and eventually some of the guys on Audio Circle, where I have my forum, they picked up on it, and then it became a discussion on Audio Circle, and it became a laughing stock that they did that review, and they only listened to one speaker. And of all the other things they did, they thought it was a total joke. And because no one does a review on a pair of speakers and listens to one speaker. That is a joke. And so I picked up on that, and I've told the guys there that it was a joke. There's no way I would send a customer to that site and say, look, they gave us a recommendation. Look how great a job we did. They gave us a recommendation. No way would I send anybody there. That was, ridiculous. And in me saying that it's ridiculous, or that it's a joke, even more, they're just steaming over there. They hate it that our speaker did so well in their own measurements, and they can't wait to somehow get even with me again. And they're constantly posting in our videos and things, anything they can, just poke. So recently I was contacted about the LGK speakers, which is the little 3-inch full range speaker that we did. And they wanted to know if we would send out a pair of them for review. And of course I know they don't do reviews. They just measure and test stuff, and then they theorize what it would sound like. So I really wasn't interested in sending anything out. Of course they're telling me that, with our $100,000 measuring system, we can measure it for you, and we can tell you how it really measures. Well, we already have a measuring system that we use. We know how it really measures. That's kind of like going into a shop where they build race cars and saying, hey, if you'll let us have one of your race cars, we'll go drain the oil out for you and change the oil for you, and we'll tell you exactly how much oil is in that race car. Well, that shop would probably laugh at you and say, well, we don't need you to tell us exactly how much oil is in our race car. We know how much oil we put in it. Thank you very much. But we can do that ourselves. That's kind of how I feel when they ask me or tell me that they're going to measure it for me. So my response, and of course this is the exact response that I gave them. Got to put the reading glasses on. Wasn't interested in having them measure that stuff. That doesn't make any difference to me. But if you have a high quality audio system that you can actually listen to them as designed, then we might be able to work something out. So what do you think? Do you think they came back and said, oh yeah, we got a high-end system here, we'll set them up and we'll put them out in the middle of the room, or we'll set them on a desktop, and we'll actually listen to these and give you some feedback on what we think? No, that's not what they were interested in at all. What they're interested in is getting a hold of one and somehow showing that it's overpriced paperweight, that it's horrible, and somehow get even with me. And so we knew that was coming when we sent out a kit, and we knew it was going to those guys. We're like, yeah, we know what's going to happen. This is coming. So here's the stuff that happened, and this is comical to me. It's so funny. They did a frequency response measurement, and they said, well, ours is much more accurate than what Danny's is. Danny uses third octave smoothing in his frequency response measurements, and which we do. That's an industry standard. Everybody uses third octave smoothing in their frequency response measurements because we're not interested in seeing every little ripple. What we're looking at is the average, and we're looking at how the tweeter balances with the mid and what the overall balance is. That's what we're looking for. And we're looking for if there is a time domain issue there. If there's phase cancellation, of course, it's going to cause a hole. And we can easily see that in the measurement. In that particular measurement, in frequency response, we're not looking for high level of accuracy in the line itself. We want to know exactly what it does at that point in space. So if we're doing an on-axis measurement, we want to see exactly what it's doing on axis. And it's okay if that's an average of those little squiggly lines. If we average that, that's okay. We're looking for the amplitude. Now, if we move up or down, we're looking for something different. We're looking for the time relationship between the two drivers that we may be measuring. So as we move up or down, those drivers are getting further away from each other, or closer or further away from each other in relation to the microphone. And what happens is the time arrival is different, and we could start seeing a dip in the response. So We want to see exactly what it's doing on axis. We want to see exactly what it's doing 4 inches up, 8 inches up, 12 inches up. We may go down, we'll go left and right, and we want to know specifically what it's doing at those positions. Now, the reason I say this is that high dollar measuring system that's being thrown in our face, what that thing does is it moves around in a big area and it takes a whole bunch of measurements and then it averages them, which is funny because they're knocking us for averaging the actual frequency response line, and then they're taking a group of measurements and averaging all of those and saying that that's more accurate, which it's not. That's then pretty much falsifying the measurement. If I move up, I want to see what happened between the drivers we're measuring and if it changed the phase relationship. It could be that a hole starts to form. So we have a dipped area there, but we have it flat on axis. So when you move around and you take it and you average them, you may have half of that dipped area show up. So you think, well, I've got a 3 dB dip right there. When in reality, on axis, you don't have a dip at all. You have a 6 dB dip as you move vertically off axis. So those are the information you need to know. When you're averaging something like that, like what they're doing, even though they're not using third octave smoothing, they're still using an average, and it's less informative. It's not accurate. It's not telling me what I need to know. So no, we don't do that. We do something that's more productive, that's specific. Then this is where it gets funny. It looked at spectral decay. Now, a spectral decay on that little 3-inch driver is super clean. That thing plays and it drops off and it stops. Now, one of the reasons being is it's very small. The moving mass is very light. So there's very little stored energy there. And so it settles really quick, just right off. And so we show a spectral decay on a 25 dB scale. Well, they showed a spectral decay on the same 25 dB scale. But theirs had some traces way down at the bottom. After it came down and stopped, there were some little longer traces that were there at the ends. And in some cases, you could see where it would play and stop, and there'd be blank space there. And then here would pick up another line, and there'd be a little resonance there, what looked like a little resonance. And then it would drop off again. And they'd say, see here, Danny's system isn't as accurate as ours. We're seeing resonances here that aren't showing up in his because he's knocking all that off. See, if we just go to a 20 dB scale, we knock 5 dB off. We just move 5 dB. Now ours matches his. It's clean. You don't see all that. He's just doing that. When they don't realize, if you look at my scale and you look at their scale, we're both measuring on a 25 dB scale. Now, is theirs more accurate than mine? Is that what's causing that? No. They don't know how to read the measurements. What happens when a driver plays and it drops and it stops, and you see a blank space, and then you see another ridgeline pop up and then drop off. What's causing that is the driver is playing not only out the front, but it's playing into the box too. There's a back wave, and those shorter wavelengths especially that it plays, being a full-range driver or a wideband driver, they're propagating within the box, and they're hitting somewhere in the box, and they're reflecting back, and they're coming through, and they're re-exciting the driver, and they're making another output that's a late arriving effect. And those of us who know how to read those measurements, we see that and we recognize it. And the reason it did that isn't because of the driver or the design. It's because you didn't put enough insulation in the box. And then we look at the impedance curves. Same thing. It's like, oh, we got this high level of accuracy. We can see in the detail, and we can see little ripple here in the impedance, little ripple there in the impedance. That's not because you have a higher level of accuracy. That's the same situation. An impedance curve, you've got something attached to the driver. It's sending a signal to that driver that's moving it, and then it's measuring the back EMF from that. So it's looking at the resistance of that driver, and it's plotting that resistance over frequency. And when there's a reflection in that box, it comes back and it re-excites that driver. Well, at that frequency where it re-excited it, you see little squiggles, and that's what they're seeing. And the reason that's happening is because they didn't put enough insulation in the box. Next thing that happens is they take the microphone and they shove it up the port's butt, and they take a measurement of the output of the port. And in this case, they say, oh man, look at this, here's the output of the port. And then in the higher frequency range, here's all this noise coming through that shouldn't be coming through the port. There's a bunch of port noise right there. Well, if a designer knew what he was doing, they'd know how to take care of that. I'm thinking, oh really? What do you think's causing all that noise to come through the port? You got a little driver here who's producing sound waves into the box, and they're short wavelengths, and they're reflecting around into the box, and then they're somehow making it to the port and coming out the port. That's because you didn't put enough insulation in the box. That's what that stuff's there for. So we've got spectral decay. We're seeing signs that there's not enough insulation in the box. We're looking at the impedance curve, and we're seeing signs that there's not enough insulation in the box. We're looking at the output of the port, and it's telling us also there's not enough insulation in the box. Like, it doesn't matter how expensive the measurement system is, if you don't know how to use it and read what's there, it doesn't make any difference. Let's go to distortion. Oh my goodness. Distortion is the biggest catchphrase out there almost. It's the most misunderstood measurements, one of the most useless of all measurements, to try and measure distortion measurements inside of a room. That's just, it's crazy. First of all, even if you could accurately measure it in a room, whether distortion is 1% or 2% doesn't make any difference. That's not telling you anything about how a speaker sounds. The distortion is going to show you if there's a problem or not. Like when you're completely overdriving the driver and the distortion shoots way up, well, you're going to see that in the distortion. You're also going to be able to hear that pretty easily too, as you've demonstrated there. The guy that shot the video, as he demonstrated in the video when he decided he'd just turn the volume up to demonstrate what happens when you overdrive it. He took distortion measurements, and of course, first thing he did was said something about measuring it at 96 dB. 96 dB, come on, man. That's the same as if you played one driver at 96 dB on the desktop, and you played, of course, the other one's going to be playing at 96 dB also. The two of them together that's 102 dB. Come on, man, really? You're going to play something, a little driver that small, you're going to try and play it to where the pair of them are at 102 dB? Come on, man, that's not what they're designed for. Then he dropped back to 90 and 86 and said, oh yeah, we're still getting these distortions here. And well, of course you are. You're playing on full range and you're overdriving it. That's still a lot of power that you're putting on them. Even at 90 dB, the pair together would be hitting peaks of 96 dB. And you weren't sending in music information. You're sending it a full range signal at 90 dB. Come on, you've already overdriven it, and that's what's causing the problem. It's not that there's a distortion problem in the driver. There's a distortion problem in the operator. That's not what they're designed for. They're not designed to play to that level. And we showed that with actual music input, that we've set this thing up to do sound clips, and we played it to where peaks were hitting 92 and 95 dB in a big room, and with no issues at all. We just used an inline filter. The little inline filter has a capacitor in line with it, and it's just rolling the lows off in a first order slope. And we brought the subs into balance somewhere between 50 and 80 hertz. That's where we set the dial, right between the 50 and the 80 mark, and adjusted the gains and the phase, and it blended right in, and those sound clips sound fantastic. The distortion tells you nothing. Here's the problem with trying to measure distortion in a room. It's like trying to measure the sound of someone's voice in a crowded cafeteria where everybody's talking and there's noise everywhere, and you've got a microphone 40 feet away trying to measure one person's voice. That's the same thing. That's what you're doing when you're trying to measure distortion in a room, because the noise floor in the room could be 40, 45, 50 dB. That's the same level as where you're trying to measure 1 or 2% distortion. So it's at the same volume level. There's no way of accurately separating those two. Even the manual for the measuring system says those same things. I'm going to read something to you from the manual. This is one of the manuals for the Clio measuring system. There it is here. And on distortion measurements, it says that while it's simple to measure and obtain meaningful distortion figures of electrical devices, measuring loudspeaker distortion in normal environments without an anechoic chamber is not easy. We'll only give some guidance here on how to take these measurements. And it talks about noise level, and when it talks about noise level, it says 50 dB SPL of ambient noise is a common figure. higher than that if your air conditioner or a heater comes on. A common figure usually does not affect amplitude evaluation, which is usually carried out at an average level of 90 dB. So if you're measuring a 90 dB amplitude level of a speaker, the room noise level down at between 45 and 50 is not going to affect that amplitude. However, this particularly true when using the Clio sinusoidal analyzation capability, which by means of DSP filtering allows exceptional signal-to-noise ratio. Unfortunately, evaluating 1% distortion means looking for signals that are 40 dB lower than 90 dB, mentioned above, in the same order or magnitude as environmental noise. So it's almost impossible to take that stuff and to take it accurately. And again, numbers down in that lower range don't really tell you anything about how something sounds. And I'll give you an example. A lot of tube amps, even really good tube amps, distortion levels measure 1%, 2%, whereas a solid state amp, the distortion numbers may be rated at 0.01% or 0.005% or something really low like that. And there's no industry standard for doing that. They could take the distortion measurement at any frequency, or they could take it at any level. In other words, they could take the distortion measure at a half of a watt and say, this is the measured distortion. Or they could take it at 20 watts or something like that. There's no standard for doing it. So those numbers are completely, almost fictitious. They really don't represent anything. And if you ask the guys that own the tube amps, they'll tell you they like the sound of those tube amps a lot better than those solid state amps. They're lusher, they're warmer, they're more musical. And my ex-partner used to describe it like this. He would say that the power of a solid state amp would be on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Whereas a tube amp, it would be more like on, on. Just the way it delivers the current is much smoother and more musical. But then there's a lot of these guys out there that say, yeah, they just like that distortion. They're just listening to distortion. No, the distortion is not what they're listening to for. That's not what they're hearing. The distortion levels are still down below the floor level. What they're hearing is other attributes, and there's 100 other attributes that make up how an amplifier sounds that has really nothing to do with distortion. Distortion is just a marketing term. It's and again, measuring a loudspeaker and trying to measure distortion on it is extremely difficult. I know you guys think that you can take that microphone and get it closer to the source. In other words, you take the microphone and put it right up on the speaker. And that works to some degree. It's like trying to measure that person in a crowded cafeteria. If you bring the microphone over and set it at his table and put it in front of him, it's easier to measure him versus the noise that's going on all around the room. But the noise is still there. It's still there. You can't separate it. I once had a guy that was having a difficult time understanding this stuff. It was somebody I was talking to online. So I set up a speaker and I measured the measured distortion at a 1 watt, 1 meter measurement, and then I measured it again with the driver disconnected. In other words, just room noise. So we had second, third, and fourth, fifth harmonics of room noise, and it picks that noise up and it just puts it there in the layers. And so I said, okay, which speaker do you think is going to sound better? Of course, one of them was not even a speaker playing at all. It's just the noise of the room. And the levels were down there so low, it was hard to decide which was which, because the room noise it's not steady. It does this. You can even tell in here, because it's 102 degrees outside today, the air conditioner's going in here. So you can hear the air conditioner going. That raises the noise floor. I'm sure you can hear it in the recording. And you can tell when it cuts off. And it's the same way when you're trying to measure distortion in a room. You can't get away from that noise floor. It's there. So, yeah, that's silly. That's silly to try and measure that stuff. Doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't tell you anything. Now, only if there's a problem does it tell you something. And if there's a problem, you can hear it. It's just like when you're clipping an amp. You can tell when you're clipping an amp. When you're overdriving it, you can hear it. I mean, if you can't hear it, you shouldn't be in audio. Same when you're overdriving a speaker. It was crazy to say, hey, listen to this. Listen to what happens when I turn this volume up and overdrive this thing. Of course it's going to get bent out of shape. That's crazy. If you use it as intended, then you're not going to hear any of that stuff. There's no distortion at all. It sounds beautiful. And those sound clips we made are phenomenal. They are phenomenal. If you listen to the original recording played through your system and then listen to the sound clip we made of that recording playing through the little LGKs, you're blown away, because there's so little coloration to those little speakers. The detail level is so good. The clarity, the vocals. It's almost like you're just playing back the original recording. It's fun. It's that phenomenal. It really is. And I'll share something with you guys regarding that. I get feedback from our customers all the time. And we've got quite a few of these LGKs out there and starting to get pretty good feedback from the customers. And I got this one the other day. It came in on the 17th from Nelson. And Nelson messaged me and he says, I finished up the kit and fired them up after some burn-in. Goosebumps from head to toe. Best sounding speakers I've ever heard. So you can imagine I'm excited to try some bigger kits soon. I tend to gamble a bit with my audio habit sometimes, and it feels like I've hit the jackpot. Though you thought you might enjoy seeing the pinnacle of my first year of woodworking, half-inch MDF core wrapped in hardwoods and full of no-res. Thanks for doing what you do. And I'm going to throw up some pictures of Nelson's speaker. Nelson's speaker looks phenomenal. Nelson, great job. That is beautiful work that you did on that speaker. And thank you for sending me some feedback. I always appreciate that from all you customers who send me feedback. Thank you very much. Last thing I'll comment on is, after the hack job there that was done by the guy doing this quote review, then they had to make fun of the name of the Little Giant Killers and said something about how I can't be calling these Little Giant Killers because they're not killing any giants, that these are basically just paperweights and they're not killing anything. Well, actually, they are killing giants. They sound phenomenal. As I already mentioned, you can hear that in the sound clips. But if we're going to talk about somebody's name, the name of the website over there where these guys are doing this stuff has the word review in the name. Come on, guys, you're not doing any reviews. Anybody doing a review is going to set up a pair of speakers, and they're going to evaluate those pair of speakers, and they're going to set them up properly and talk about all those intangible things. How did they sound? Well, how was the imaging and the sound stage and the layering and the whole bunch of stuff that you're never going to hear when you're listening to one speaker. That's all they do over there is they'll do a bunch of tests and they'll play one speaker and they'll say something about it, but they never listen to a pair, which is, to me, it's crazy. When they did that on the little Encores, again, my guys that got a hold of that, oh, they thought that was such a joke. So you guys should really take review out of your name over there. You're not doing reviews. And then you have the word science in your name. Might as well take that off too. You're not doing any science. In science, you have to test what you theorize. In other words, you create a theory, and then in order to see if that theory is true or not, you have to test it. And in this case, the theory is that A or B sounds better or different, or maybe do these two things sound different, or does this have an effect on the sound, or whatever. It all comes back to a question, and you've hypothesized the answer, but you haven't tested the answer. If you're going to, you want to know if something has an audible effect, you have to listen to it. That's all there is to it. There's no way around it. You can't confirm audible effects by not listening. That's ridiculous. And that's not applying any science. If you're applying science, you have to test the theory that you create. So you might as well take that out of the name too. So none of that makes any sense. So can't be making fun of the names of stuff, guys. Not when you're doing that. Okay, so in conclusion to all this mess, I know I went a little tit for tat, but some of this stuff was so stupid. Felt like I had to come in and just clear the air and point out the obvious for the people who just don't get it. So going forward, a lot of these naysaying guys, again, they're like that little dog yapping out there in the distance. There's some noise out there, and maybe we should just ignore that noise. But being the guy I am, I keep extending that olive branch out there to these guys, and I'm still going to do it, regardless of who you are. If you're set on the belief that things like this don't matter and you want to learn the difference, come on over. Come on over. And even the guy that took all these measurements, I've invited him before. I'll invite him again. Come down to Texas. We'll go eat some barbecue. We'll break some bread. We'll sit down in here and we'll listen to music and we'll let you determine, do power cables matter? Do speaker cables really matter? Do tube connectors matter? We can listen to speakers with and without tube connectors. We can listen to a whole bunch of things. And let's find out what's audible and what's not audible. It's pretty easy. And all the people that I've had over here before have all been in 100% in consensus, and no one has ever said that they couldn't hear a difference between anything that we compared. Everything sounds a little bit different. Some things pretty dramatic, some things subtle, but it's easy to hear those differences on systems like this. So the invitation is out there, and you can take it or not. It's up to you guys. The ball's in your court. No more back and forth on the videos. I'm sure you'll probably have to do another one that follows this, and this is stupid. I've said what I needed to say. I've extended the olive branch. I'm done with this stuff. The next videos we see, hopefully, are getting back to fun stuff and dissecting speakers and making things better and talking about how to make things better and improve your listening experience. I can't wait to get back to that stuff, and I'm glad to be done with this. See you guys in the next video.